If everyone can proceed inside and take a seat, we're starting in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we give you a couple more. As everyone's proceeding, if you can try and grab anyone who's outside still. We closed the bar, by the way. Courtesy of Patrick. All right, so welcome. Welcome to the Monaco Energy Boat Challenge rendezvous during the Monaco Ocean Week. I will briefly introduce the event for the few of you who may not know about the Energy Boat Challenge. But before, please have a look at what was achieved so far and what we expect to achieve again this year. Thank you.
Challenge event that I've ever attended, because there's a variety of power sources, and using it in a boat just on site, I think, is what people need to see today.
We can change a lot of things, and we can change our world now because the technology is there.
It's amazing. We've been here a few times, 5 times to be correct.
We're here to represent the UAE and the whole Middle East region.
C'était juste incroyable, donc un final en beauté.
Team of University of Bologna and 25 students.
Things have to change, and by claiming that, like you do it this week, you get all my support. Electronically regulated, a new boat that's all electronically.
Thank you, and welcome back. So what's the connection between the Monaco Energy Boat Challenge and today's session? Pretty simply, the intention, the objective of the Boat Challenge is to trigger discussions around the theme of innovation and sustainability, aiming to foster collaboration for the development of tomorrow's yachting. This is why today we bring together different business sectors involved in the superyacht industry. From design to construction, from operations to business, a range of expert panelists will discuss the context of current and future sustainability obligations and the opportunities for the development of innovative solutions to address low-carbon objectives. They will in particular address market perception and discuss the cost and added value of eco-responsible yachting. But before we start with the roundtable, as you can see, there are 4 empty chairs for the time being, which will be filled in about half an hour. We will have 2 keynote presentations. The first keynote presentation is about the development of marine protected areas. Obviously, there's a strong link between the need to have sustainable yachting and the need to protect the oceans and the environment. So without further ado, I would like to have our Zoom speaker.
Yeah. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. So the floor is yours. We leave it to you to introduce yourself in a few words and to explain what your role is. Thank you.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, it's fine.
I don't think you hear me. Yes, you hear me?
Yes, we do.
I'm gonna try to with the link, but up here it is. Okay. Okay. Hello everyone. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm happy to be with you even online. I'm the director of the Marine Service of Agde municipality in south of France, in Occitanie region, and managing an MPA, small MPA, which is named Côte-Gatoise. I'm also member of the board of METPAN. METPAN is a network of 130 MPA managers, members and partners dedicated, this network dedicated to halt the loss in biodiversity in Mediterranean Sea, and also to support MPAs to be effectively managed, because one of the goals is to have MPAs managed. I will try to continue my view if I can. Where is it? Yep. Where is it? I don't know if you see it. Do you see my slides?
Not yet.
Yes, okay.
No, we don't see it.
Sorry, I don't hear you. Is it okay?
No, we don't see it.
No?
Renaud,
Okay.
can you hear me?
I'm going to try again. Oh, here it is. Okay.
Now we do.
I think that's right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much. Sorry. So let's go to this map, which is a map regarding to all the MPAs around the world. As you can see, there are nearly all over the world. And what's interesting, it's only 8% of the global ocean which are covered by marine protected area, and only 2% of these 8% are exclusively no-take. That doesn't mean no-go for yachting, for example, but no-take, for example, no fisheries, for example. And in Europe, it's quite different. It's 12% of the MPAs are under protection. And what's interesting is, as I said, it was 8% to 2% highly protected. And during the World Congress of Nature in Hawaii in 2016, the call was really up. It was to go to 30% in 2030, and particularly 10% of highly protected all over the world. Just two examples. The largest, I don't know if you know it, but the largest is the Ross Sea, so Antarctica. Okay, yeah, so far away from here, but it's 2 million Kelvin square meters, so that's a lot. And the smallest, it's interesting because it's normally it's in Monaco. That doesn't mean that the smallest is not the less effective. Of course, it is not, but it's very small regarding to the other MPAs. So just some pictures of MPAs around the world. You have Australia, Seychelles Islands, Cuba, Iceland, Philippines, Australia, and so on. For the Mediterranean, this is a map. Oh, sorry. This is a map made by METPAN Data MapAmed, which is a special map, and RAXPA too. As you can see, most of the MPAs are in the north and northwest of the Mediterranean, particularly, but some of them are in the south. Some in Tunisia, for example, Algeria, a little bit in Libya. And the largest is maybe you know it because Monaco is part of this area. It is Pelagos Sanctuary, which is something less than 100,000 km². So, and the new one, as you can see on the left of the map, it is between Spain and the Balearic Islands. It's a new one, just 3 or 4 years ago. It's named the Corridor. It has been made for cetaceans. It's something like 46,000 square meters. So if you continue, just to have a look at this. This is interesting because now in the Mediterranean we can see around 1,000 MPAs in 2020. It has begun in early in the 70s with National Porpro, which is not so far away from Monaco. And as you can see, it's, the curve is really going up and up and up till the last one, which is the corridor I told you some slides ago. And just to know that the importance was mainly because of the Natura 2000 sites, which are MPAs where things are not forbidden on the totality of the MPA, but there are sometimes rules, and it's a bit on the way of well manage these sites. So all the green you see with the app, it's Croatia, it's Greece particularly, and Italy. But now we are around 1,000 MPAs in the Mediterranean. Next one, here it's an interesting slide. You can see the marina port in with moorings around the Mediterranean. As you can see, of course, you all know that most of them are in the western Mediterranean, and also the density of vessel tracks by AIs, but it's for leisure boats. And what's interesting because we can count around 1,000 marinas around the Mediterranean, and on both sides for the yacht. I know maybe you know that. I'm sure about 100,000 members of crew also. That means that it's important. It's an important activity, of course. And on the other side, just to tell you that the prevision for 2050 is about 500 million tourists in the Mediterranean. It grows every year and every year, and has the because of the pandemic, the actual pandemic, it's going up more than we thought at the beginning. Just some pictures of some MPAs inside the Mediterranean. You have Crete, you have Albania, Croatia, Corsica, you have Turkey, and on the right, above on the right, you have Syria and Libya, because these countries, before all the problems we know, did have some MPAs. And here it's Spain, Morocco, Algeria, and two specific species we are very known as the grouper and the coral and the red coral. Which is one of the best, one of the most known species in the Mediterranean. So just to say that, of course, Mediterranean Sea is under pressure, but it's very specific because for less than 1% of the global ocean in this area, there are more than 4% of all the marine species known. The average is around 10%, which is very, very important. And inside this, 20% of the species are really endemic. That means that you can only see them and find them in the Mediterranean. And on the other side, as I said, you have a lot of people living on the coast, of course, and a lot of tourism, as I said just a few ago. What about the pressure? The pressure are there. Maritime traffic, big third of all over the world. The first world tourist destination, anyway, but exploitation of hydrocarbons too, overexploited resources, particularly with fisheries, land-based pollution, and of course it's you know all that because of the climate change. I'm going to try to look to show you something very special. I hope it will move. I'm trying.
It's not connecting.
So do you see it? So it's a video called by We Want to Reduce Allergy, and I'm going to try to go further here. To go further here, see, from there.
Renaud is not showing, so I think we should pass.
Here you can see the impact of an anchor with a large yacht, the impact on the biodiversity of the marine biodiversity in the Mediterranean, and particularly with Posidion abaes here. As you can see, can have a huge impact.
The presentations will be available on the Yacht Club's website to download, so then you'll be able to find the film and have a look at it. It's pretty telling.
Yep. And go ahead if I can. Sorry. Up, up. So, it's okay? It's still okay?
We're still here, but we can't see your shared screen. If you can't share the screen anymore, then maybe a few words of conclusion so that we can...
Yeah. It's okay? Do you see me again?
We see you, but we don't see your screen.
Okay. Sorry. So I'm going to head because I don't know if we have time to go to the partage l'écran. Here it is. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if we have seen the video. I'm sorry. Did you?
It's okay. We can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm moving fastly. Just to say that around the MPAs, as you know, of course, there are institutional and legal framework at the global level, Mediterranean one, and EU level, of course. I'm just passing for this part. I can. And just to say that for NPS also, as you might know, there is an important recovery of declining species. It's play a real role strengthening the resilience of ecosystems, and also, which is less known, when NPAs are co-managed with other stakeholders, it can develop socio-economic activities such as small key fishing and sometimes ecotourism. For example, in St. Martin, in the Caribbean Sea, 30,000 euros per year per kilometre carré. For example, in Saint Martin, around 500,000 per year, and in the total UK NPAs, something about more than 20 billion are generated by the well-managed NPAs per year. And as you can see on this map, on this slide, so quickly, the benefits of the NPAs can be on many sides. Tourism and recreation activity, of course, but also carbon sequestration, which is very important with the importance of climate change, for example, but also subsistence fisheries or commercial fisheries. So that means that the NPS is not only to protect the biodiversity, but also to have face-to-face with the economic benefits. Here you have a map coming from Zakynthos, which is a small island in Greece, maybe you know. Just to say that the ingredients of an effective EPA are to have contacts with stakeholders, of course, to have boundaries marked most of the time, to have baseline data, of course, to have management plan in order to know what you do every year. So local management unit and also someone to have surveillance at sea, and also communication and awareness activities. And around this, that means that what is important, I think, as I am also manager of NPA, you understood this, it is the importance of the revelations, but also to the dialogue and the win-win way we have to have with stakeholders, the consultations in order to have actions. as maybe you know, for example, ecological moorings or new apps, applications, mobile application, which can be easier for the stakeholders and for the users of the sea to grow inside the MPAs.
Renaud, can you hear me?
Just to tell you that we are not alone in the Mediterranean to have networks. There are networks around the West Africa, around the Caribbean, North Africa, and recently in the Indian Ocean with the Pan, which are colleagues working a lot with a lot of institutions too, and managers on the field, but not only, and also with other stakeholders like yachting area. And thank you for attention. I'm sorry if the video hasn't moved. It's always difficult with video, with online video.
Thank you, Renaud. It's not easy to do it in a distance, so please give him a big round of applause for all the initiatives that they do with MedPan. And obviously, MPAs are very important and are developing. The presentation, as I said earlier, will be available to download. And of course, you can check on the internet to find more about their projects. The protection of the environment, especially around the coast, is vital, as we all know. And what's interesting also is that it does bring economic benefits to look at it, not just from the perspective of the protection of the environment, but to the potential added value that it brings to the protected areas. And talking about added value, which is going to be the key topic of our roundtable, I would like to introduce the context of this roundtable through a brief summary of where things stand when it comes to regulations. Regulations for obviously the protection of the oceans, but regulations especially about emissions. And to take a look at that, the easier way is to look at what's being done in shipping and how yachting confronts the evolution of regulations in shipping with the evolution of regulations that are applicable or not in the yachting industry. And that will be one of the topics we'll discuss with the panelists. So you have here the brief summary of the contents of this quick keynote. Same thing, there's a lot of information into it. We'll go through it quickly in order to save time for the roundtable, but we'll make it available for all participants to download from the Energy Boat Challenge website. So where does all this come from? Well, basically it all comes from, if it works, yes it does, it all comes from the fact that in the shipping industry there's a lot of ships, and a lot of ships, basically close to 1,100 units, a lot of ships that do a lot of freight. 10.7 billion tons of freight yearly across the globe. Well, obviously with the pandemic it's slowed down a little bit, but that gives you a telling picture of how much of the freight and how much of our consumption goes via the oceans. So the question is, how does that account in terms of actual emission of CO2, which is one of the core battles that we're all fighting? Can anyone have a guess as the total amount in tons of CO2 emitted yearly by the shipping industry? No one has a guess. That's good. That means that we are good at doing our educational mission. Well, basically, the benchmark is 2008. And in 2008, based on EEDI, we'll talk about that briefly afterwards, calculations, there was close to 1 billion tons of CO2 emitted yearly by the shipping industry. Shipping and generally fishing, I mean basically navigation. 1 billion tons. The objective set by the IMO is to bring these numbers down by 2030, down by 30%, basically 40% 2030 and 50% 2050. It doesn't seem like a huge number. After all, 30%, 40%, 50% is not so much. The reality is what you need to look at here is what we call the intensity. Why the intensity? Simply because as in the yachting industry, the number of units increases. With the increase in the number of units, the reality is that the total fleet will have to perform a lot better than 50% by 2050. That's where we have the emission gap. So with the increase in the fleet number of units, the reality is you need a 70% reduction. So where does yachting come into play here? You've got a couple of data below the graph. 1.18 billion tons for the whole maritime industry, which is basically 3.3% of the total emissions of CO2 worldwide. It's not that much after all. And then you look at the yachts. If we make the calculation based on the 2009 IMO GHG study, today's fleet would be at about 3 million tons of CO2 only. And you will say it's not that much, but we'll talk about that later. Oops. How come I've got, I don't know why, there's a conflict of slides. Okay. So now we see basically what the IMO's strategy or objectives are, and some of the recommended routes to follow for the shipping industry. One of the first ones is speed reduction, and we can talk about that later for yachts as well. Speed reduction, because as you know, the moment you want to go for high speed, the consumption of fuel increases dramatically. It's not linear, as everyone knows. Obviously, some decisions can have to do with the politics, politicians deciding on carbon taxes, which is happening. And the question will be what's the level of taxation that would be acceptable or that will actually make people change their ways of doing things. And then in the long term is the development of zero emission, zero carbon fuels, which we'll tackle also with our panelists. So just to understand where all this comes from, there are some acronyms that need to be explained for those of you who don't know them. The EEDI, the Energy Efficiency Design Index, has been established by the IMO to assume and make calculation based on the hull design, mostly, of the yachts, but also in taking into account the cargo they carried. And it's been demonstrated that the EEDI calculation method is not fully applicable to yachts because obviously yachts do not carry cargo. They're not freight forwarders, unless that's what you call your passengers. So we need to look at other ways of making calculations for the yachting industry, which is something that the Yacht Club, the Monaco, has in fact developed with the project of the Sea Index. If we look then at the other acronym, which is EEOI, Energy Efficiency Operational Indicator, which we would compare as our KPIs, key performance indicators in our industry. Then we can consider, again, making projections from established for existing samples that yachts over 24 meters will emit over 8 million tons of CO2 yearly. It's not that much, 0.015% of the total emissions. It's not much. However, everyone has to play their part. Some of the measures or suggestions from the IMO, which is something that the yachting industry looks into as well, and we'll talk about it, are summarized in the, on the chart next to it. Energy efficiency measures. Won't detail this further, we'll discuss. So, all that comes from the application of MARPOL. I leave it to you to read. One of the key aspects to keep in mind is that MARPOL was initiated in 1973. And its implementation only started from 2005. And now we're reaching what we call Tier 3 of the Annex 6, right? By the late 2010s. So all this is actually taking a long time, and I would say probably too much time for implementation. But beyond that, the thing is that this is applicable to shipping. It's not applicable to yachting, except in some cases. Again, conflict of slides. Well, in fact, it is linked to the previous presentation. What's happening at the same time as you have these reduction of emission objectives is the development of what we call the emission control areas. At the moment, you can see that they're pretty limited. They combine with the MPAs we talked about before, but you can also see that there are opportunities for developing these ECAs, which are linked to the level of sulfur and NOx especially, as indicated in the previous slide. So ideally, or technically, the MED could, in a few years' time, become a new ECA, and that will have an impact on yachting. It will have an impact on yachting because one of the things that need to be kept in mind is that MARPOL's regulations applicable to shipping also have an impact on yachts over 24 meters that pass through ECAs. To put it shortly, in a few years' time, whenever a yacht wants to go, a yacht over 24 meters, wants to pass through and go chartering, for example, in ECA zones, well, they will have to comply with the regulations set by the IMO on the level of emissions. Unfortunately, it's not there yet. But one of the things that the IMO does now is to collect data. We talked about data collection before, and all this data collection, which we know a number of yards are also achieving, is important to be able to move forward in the right direction. So when we look at the objectives with the EEOI type of approach, it is already possible, definitely, to save between 20 to 25% of fuel consumption. That's a given. That's something that should already be the case today. Then we can talk about alternative fuels. There was an excellent presentation done 3 years ago here at the Yacht Club during the Energy Boat Challenge. So I'll leave it to you to get back to that presentation, explaining the benefits and drawbacks of some of the alternative fuels. We don't have much time, so I'll pass on quickly onto that. But the key point is that solutions do exist. There are already alternative fuels. Another one. There's already alternative fuels that are relevant to help decarbonize the yachting industry. Of course, there's issues of space, of volume, of cost associated with these alternative fuels, but the reality is that it is already possible, and some are doing it. How many? That's what our experts will tell us. So technically, the way to look at it is to develop a strategy that will enable the development of the use of alternative fuels. And what's missing at the moment in this bridge or bridging gap is not so much the existence of the fuels, but the lack of infrastructure to be able to actually turn them into concrete reality tomorrow. So, in conclusion, in a way, the examples that's detailed here is exactly what I mentioned earlier about the intensity. If we consider that there's 12,000 yachts over 24 meters today outside there, they will not be in a position to reduce their carbon emission down to 50% reduction by 2050, because at the same time we've got more yachts coming onto the market, and we can anticipate that there would be probably by 2030 about 18,000 super yachts over 24 meters, which basically means that we need to make sure that these 18,000 units will only emit 1.8 million tons of greenhouse gases. Does it sound possible? Does it sound feasible? That we'll talk about it as well. What the key point is that if only all new yachts built were zero emission, we would still have to reduce our emissions by 65%. And if not all of them being built at the moment are zero emission, the whole fleet will have to reduce its emissions by 80%. Keep that in mind. I would like to highlight the excellent study that was done by a student in 2013, Sabah Halwan. Was done at the university, also in collaboration with Azimut Beneti. to explain and see the differences between the EEDI and the application to yachts. And certainly some of the conclusions have led to changes in the approach. So I would recommend anyone to actually find it on the internet. It's easy to find and download and read it. It's quite technical, but it's certainly of interest. So in conclusion, yes, the EEDI may not be fully relevant. MARPOL Tier 3 should only be the initial phase and should definitely be applicable to yachts and be more stringent. Having an environmental management plan or energy efficiency management plan for yachts is definitely something that all yacht owners and yacht management companies should contemplate pushing forward. And we'll talk about what's being pushed forward to owners and clients in a few minutes. And then for alternative fuels, please do consider them because they do exist. Yes, it's complicated, but they are available already right now. Thank you, and now let's start with the roundtable. Unless you have already some questions, but we can keep them for later. So our roundtable will be split into two parts. If there's no, okay. Slide conflicting. So the first part is about the construction phase. So from design to new technologies and innovation. From construction, I'd like to call Charles, Engel, and Joan on to take a seat on the table. And the second part will be about the operation. So the idea here is to look at, and obviously we want the session to be as interactive as possible. We want to look at two sides of what we call added value. The objective is to also discuss whether it's the perceived or the reality of added value when it comes to having a low carbon strategy for the construction of yachts and then for the operations of yachts, which will be the second part of our roundtable. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It seems it's been a long day for a lot, but I hope we'll make that discussion interesting. I would like to, and I'll join you on one of the chairs, I would like to start with a question to Engel from Lloyd's Register. A lot of the explanations before were about regulations and what do regulations bring or don't bring to the table. I also understand that Lloyd's Register has developed a specific certificate for hybrid yachts. And so I would like to have your view from a regulation classification society perspective on the situation today and how you consider the development of low carbon yachts. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'll stand up because I feel a bit more comfortable if I stand up and walk around. That probably shows I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm not really. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Engel Jan de Boer. I've been with Lloyd's for 26 years, responsible for the yacht segment within LR. And thank you very much for having had the opportunity to speak to you today about, amongst other things, alternative fuels and the challenge which we face not only as an industry but as a population, I suppose. From my perspective, if you look at it generically, we're actually being faced with a trilemma within the era of the increase of energy consumption we're going through as humankind. I did have a slide which would actually show the trilemma I'm being faced with. Perhaps somebody can put it up, but I'll put it to you. If you think about it properly, there's three challenges which we face really. One is an energy, I would call it an energy security. So in other words, where nowadays are we going to get our energy from? Well, we're particularly at the moment being faced with some terrible consequences globally. It is having an impact on the energy supplies and considering at the same time that our energy consumption is significantly increasing globally, it is a fundamental question you should ask yourselves. And we're asking ourselves this for our own industry as well, for the yacht industry. Where is the energy going to come from? What kind of alternative fuels are we going to use now and in the future? So that's the first trilemma we have. The second one is the energy equity, and that's all about costs. How much is it going to cost? Sure, let's change to a different fuel type, but how much is it going to cost me to operate this new fuel type? How much is it going to cost me to start new equipment and components in my vessel? How much is it going to cost me to convert all the so-called polluting diesel-propelled yachts, which all of, probably the majority of which you now see here in this particular port, but you see globally? I mean, we could be controversial and say, well, when are we going to stop using these polluting diesel engines in this world? Well, I can assure you it's not going to happen today or tomorrow. It's going to take a little while, but there's hope on the horizon. Definitely something is going to change. And last but not least, and very fundamentally and very important, not just for us nowadays, but also for everybody in the future, is the energy sustainability. So those are the 3 points which are very much important. Now, what is our role in that respect? Of course, our fundamental role within the maritime industry is not just about safeguarding safety and quality. Of course, it is our prime purpose, but also we'd like to be seen as safety and innovators. We want to move with the industry to move forward. And hence, yes, fortunately, amongst the industry, particularly the yacht industry, there's a lot of pioneers who are willing to invest large sums of money, time and energy, and some of them are sitting at this table. I'm not saying you're spending your own money in it, but you are spending a lot of time and energy in it. And I'm talking about alternative fuels. And I'm talking about driving the industry forward, which is so extremely important for us to finally to be able to demonstrate what can I say? Actually, to shed this image which we have of villains and hookers and polluting industry. Because that, frankly speaking, and I don't shy back from being controversial, that's unfortunately at times the image which we have. And we have a huge opportunity, and fortunately there are these pioneers nowadays who are willing to invest money in alternative fuels. I think at the moment within LR, looking at the yacht business, we have about 20 to 25 projects, yacht projects, which are actually happening, dealing with alternative fuels. So they will actually be either fully fueled with alternative fuels or as a hybrid version, and then we're talking about methanol, then we're talking about hydrogen, and of course what you see a lot of nowadays is of course batteries. One of the questions I was asked before, and the picture is courtesy of FedShip, because this actually comes out of a risk assessment we participated in this week. But quite often we get this question, what is fundamentally the impact on a yacht if I want to start using alternative fuels, and what will be the impact in terms of space? So I thought this picture depicts it pretty well. The impact that it has on space all has to do with the density and with the calorific fuel value of the fuel itself. And that has an impact in terms of how much fuel do you actually need in order to deliver the same amount of energy. And I think this picture actually says it all. It's not just about the size of the tanks you can see, but it's also about the cofferdams surrounding the tanks and all of the other additional equipment and safety measures you need to put in place. It does have an impact. And the only way to address that is, like I alluded to previously, is not just providing you with stringent rules and regulations, of which there are plenty if you really want to, but it's actually to go down the route of a risk assessment. And that's exactly what is happening with the majority of alternative fuels. It provides alternatives and it provides solutions to concepts which are completely out of the box. And we encourage it. So that is the way we are positioned within LR, and I'm glad and I thank the industry that we're allowed to work on such wonderful projects.
Thank you. So you say that...
Thank you.
So regulations and regulators and classification society do take a initiative to drive through and push through these evolutions. This is your conclusion, through the risk assessment.
Yes, of course, we're always seen as a little bit as the villains as well. That is also to do with the fact that we are there to safeguard quality and safety. So at times we do have to say, no, something is not possible. But the most important thing is that even if you do have to say, no, something is not possible, whatever is being put forward towards us, is to work together to make it possible. And there is enough brains and capacity and know-how, and most importantly, drive. Drive not just from those fortunate who can afford to invest large sums of money in new technology, but also the younger generation. Do you think that they are going to accept sailing on a polluting diesel in the future? Seriously? I don't think so. It will take a while, don't get me wrong, it will take a while, but something will change.
Thank you, Engel. So thanks for these remarks, which actually makes it an easy transition to bring a question forward to Jérôme, who's with RUPAC and is obviously an innovator himself. He's been very involved and committed to the Energy Boat Challenge over the past many years. And I think he's got also a take on that when we talk about risk assessment and the opportunities that open to us. What's your?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Normally I'm sitting here in a race tenue and competing here in the race, but I'm glad that I'm invited here to speak now also in this setting. As Frypack, a really innovative design studio, this is a very exciting time, of course. We are on a new turning point with new fuel, different fuels, different owners also. So it's an exciting time ahead of us. But I would like to step a little bit back more in the future. We are all talking about what does this cost. But I would like to go back to 2008, because at that time we are already starting solar boat racing. We invested, and that's why I not say cost, but invest. I think we all have to invest in sustainable energy and sustainable solutions. We invest already at that time in our industry, in our young students, in our new products, because we believe that the students from now and from the past are our employees of the future, and we need them to solve our problems that we are facing. And we see already the result. We are busy with a 60-meter plus sailing yacht, and the client of that boat just said, I want non-fossil fuel on board, as a statement. And he said, I would like to invest in that. And how to achieve this as a company or as an industry, we selected the students from 2008, which were racing here outside the harbor, to help us with that. We have thermal experts, we have structural engineers, we have mechanical engineers, we have people outside our industry. Combining all this knowledge, we only can achieve this step we have to make, I think. So investing in 2008 and now is helping us in our project at the moment. And we make big steps on that. The vessel we were working on has really outstanding performance in solar panel, where we can more than double or maybe triple the harvesting. We can harvest triple the energy which we normally can get out of the solar panels. So the students and the investment we did in the past really is paying off now.
Thank you. So you're saying innovation is there, the solutions are being worked upon. What makes it that there is still a gap in a way between the R&D, the innovators, the young engineers, and the adoption by the future or existing yacht owners to turn it into a concrete reality from tomorrow? I mean, obviously, from a classification perspective, well, the regulations are there to help provide safety and risk assessment, but they are not anything that will break any progress.
Yeah.
So what, in your opinion, is actually that, where does that gap come from?
I think how we can overcome that gap, because that's more interesting, I think. We have to think forward all. Huh? So we have forward-thinking shipyards. We need them. We, as a design studio, need to be forward-thinking. But also we need the clients. We were luckily with a client who just made a statement, I want a non-fossil fuel boat. And he said, I would like to invest in that, and I would also like to share this information. So it's really a new type of client who is busy with topics like that. And these kind of clients, maybe it's only 4 or 5% of the clients that in the total market. But we as an industry need to embrace these clients and with them change the industry.
Can I ask you a question? Why, or even a question to the audience? It's an obvious question, I suppose, but why is there this reluctance to change? You know, we're looking at our future. I know it takes investment and it takes courage and technical ability, brains. But as always, like any change, and regardless of whether it's a technology change, there is always a reluctance. And together, as an industry, regardless of whether you're from a classification society, the innovators of Freipack, the fat ships of this world, the flag states, it's encouraging to see that there is a momentum now for change, but there is definitely a need to embrace it more. And I'm still astonished at times about the reluctance to change.
Jeroen, you want to?
Yeah. I'm thinking on that. Huh? We also had previous pre-discussion up front. Yes, of course, we are looking to the future, and we need to change the future. But we also have to keep on the current situation. In the car industry, we have a life cycle maybe of a car of 10 or 15 years. But in our boats, in our vessels, it's maybe 50 years that boats that the current fleet will sail and still have pollution bringing out in the world. So also as a company, of course, we are looking forward, but we are also looking back and investing and need your help as an industry to join up with us to bring the current pollution in the diesel engines to a cleaner solution. Yeah.
There's no choice.
No, we have to.
You pointed it out earlier on during your excellent presentation. There is no choice. No.
Thank you. Before we give the mic to the audience, because I'm sure they'll have plenty of questions or comments to make as well. I can see numerous representatives from naval architects and shipyards. They probably have something to say as well. I would like to ask Charles, who's had a wide experience across various sectors of the industry, to share his perception of how evolution, innovation is being adopted or not adopted from the construction, from the owners, from the charter perspective, something we'll discuss further in the second roundtable. But please, can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Laurent. I think I can jump straight on the back of what my co-speakers just said. We use words like innovation, pioneer, design that Marnix mentioned. It's a design approach. I think there's also leadership. The question, what's the block? And then if you take a wide definition of the word leadership, we can all be leaders. You use the word investment as well. So what does that mean? It's not just investment in terms of a financial point of view. It's time, it's resources. R&D, innovation, bringing on the future is an inherently risky and therefore vulnerable exercise. So where you work, the type of culture you work in, whether you've got the bandwidth personally, things like that. I think for me, it's also a question of leadership. And taking the initiative, and then how do we do that in terms of collaboration? It's a sort of an innovator mindset, I think is key.
Thank you. We've spoken about alternative fuels as one of the keys to making changes, but we've also seen that there are other solutions to already help achieve some progress. Is there anyone in the audience who's got some experience to share about some projects that they're working on, without mentioning the projects, obviously? Like Jeroen has done, to tell us whether there's indeed a lot of efforts being made nowadays, or if it's very scarce. Yes, Farouk?
Can we ask that question another way and say, can anyone that's working on a project, and Farouk gets to put his hand up without breaching an NDA, is anyone else working on a zero fuel or emissions project in this room?
I can already answer on behalf of everybody. Nobody is doing a zero emission project, because that simply doesn't exist. So we need to stop talking about zero emission, or you have to take off the human aspect on board simply because of them breathing. But there's a certain balance between CO2 and oxygen, and that's what we need to restore.
Yeah, that's why
but then I will come up with my comment. Sorry.
Now we call it low carbon. Yes, but can you tell us about your experience in?
Well, I just wanted to respond to Engel's remark. The lack of willingness, maybe, or the reluctance, the way you try to describe it. There are two elements that are very important. First of all, the innovation of technology, which I think there's a huge effort by many colleagues, designers, as well as yacht builders, engineers, naval architects. A lot of people are really trying their utmost, specifically in this industry. Talking about FedShip itself, from hybrid up to alternative fuels like biofuels. At the moment, fuel cell technology in combination with hydrogen and methanol. So there are many examples of. I'm trying to make sure I don't breach any contract. So at FedShip we are definitely on that path, but at the same time there are many aspects to green, because you have to look at it from a holistic point of view. It's not only emission rates, it's also about alternative materials. Take teak, for instance. The way you use steel, there's green aluminium, green steel, and there are a lot of examples like that. So you have to approach it from a holistic point of view. The reluctance, I think, comes from a certain element of proof of concept. Because I think there are a lot of people that are absolutely willing, but simply don't dare to go that path because they want to see some proof of concept to evolve into that direction. I think that's the biggest gap that we need to bridge as an industry to bring them, to welcome them on board of innovation.
Absolutely, and the funny thing is, for one reason or another, it's all not rocket science. Okay, hydrogen, ooh. It's not that complicated, really. Battery-powered yachts. Ooh, Samsung's exploding in airplanes. Ooh, we're all scared of it. It's not happening. The technology has evolved at such an enormous, tremendous rate. Of course, you need to take the appropriate safety precautions, but we don't have to be afraid of it anymore. It is there. It's available. You can use it. There's a few regulations which need to be changed. There's a few port authorities which need to be convinced in order to make sure that you can provide the fuel. There's a couple of challenges here and there. But from a technology point of view, it is there and it is safe.
Thank you. Before we shift to the second part of the roundtable, I have two questions for the three of you. And of course, you're welcome to make any statement or comment as well in the audience. The idea here is also to consider what's the added value of, building, designing, incorporating new technologies as low carbon emission technologies into yacht constructions. And so my question is double, is in a way, how much more does it cost for you? What do you think it costs? And to what extent you consider that economically speaking, I'm not even talking about ecologically speaking, but that added value of that strategy is worth it in the short to the long term. Either of you wants to answer?
I'll have a go. From a pure, it depends how you value or how you describe cost. I think we have to accept there's a green premium if a client, either on the demand side or an industry on the supply side, we want to do this. Going back to, we have to invest, we have to explore, we have to test, we have to do research and development. So the assumption is, if you're talking to a client and we're comparing to what exists, the status quo, there is a, if we call it a green premium, it will cost on paper more in terms of time, resources. Is that cost worth it? I think we're talking about something bigger than that. So I would argue, yes, it is worth it. Yes, there's a cost, but is it worth it? Yes, there's a value, absolutely.
Thank you. We'll have some further feedback with the second range of panelists.
You would be a fool if nowadays you would order a yacht which is not ready for future fuels. You would be a fool if you don't. If you order a yacht, or if you're contemplating buying, purchasing a yacht for future resale value alone. If you're going to buy a yacht nowadays, simply with your MTU generators, etc., the usual configuration, of course you can, no problem. It's possible, and you can still operate here at sea. But when all the environmental sensitive areas come in, and more MPAs are being introduced, and you're being restricted in your operation, and at a certain point you want to get rid of it, of your yacht, your asset, you're not going to be able to get rid of it, or you're going to get rid of it from a scrap price, unless you're at least make sure that your yacht is ready to have an alternative system in place which will make it viable for another 20 years, 30 years. I mean, you said it yourself. I mean, yachts, they don't disappear. They don't get scrapped. They keep on sailing. Fantastic. Good. Well,
and from the design perspective, I think it's easy to say we need double engine rooms, we need more space, less crew space, or less gas space. I think the challenge is ahead of us to see how we can implement the current wish of the clients into these boats, so which means that probably we need rethink the efficiency of all the systems, rethink of all the sizes, rethink the technology, so that space-wise we will stay and can deliver the clients the space that they get used to at the moment.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions for them before we get to the three other panelists? Yes, Charlotte, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I think it's pretty fair to say most people in the room are believers in terms of sustainability and understanding the impact. It will be good to understand going forward, how do we communicate to the non-believers? Sad to say, but there are people who still do not believe in climate change and the impact it has on the environment. And I do believe there has to be that gap in communication between the believers and non-believers. We're kind of preaching to the choir, so to speak, if we all, to a certain extent, understand the impact. But how do we communicate to the people who do not?
I can answer that by palming that off to the next panel, who are the sales and marketers.
Well, what's interesting is you said that we're preaching to the converted, but the reality is that, I mean, yes, there may be projects, but there's not that many projects. And you're still building yachts that are running on diesel, you know. So even though we are all convinced here, the reality outside may not be that same. And we'll talk to, indeed, the sales and marketing specialists to discuss the business side of things.
Laurent, we have an answer with Monex.
Well, not my answer, but it's a very, very good question, by the way. But leading on from what Jeroen just said, is that I could just give the example. So the owner for which we're doing this project, Zero, he specifically chose, which is very difficult contractually, but everything we've researched, and this is currently over 45,000 research hours, to make that open source. So everything which is researched, including all our mistakes, and we made many, it will be an open source project. This is his answer to exactly your question, like how do we now get this across to the rest of the world? How do we inspire the rest of the industry and beyond to learn from this? Not sure if it's the whole question, but it's a very good question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions to these gentlemen?
Just like I said earlier on, just to catch on to what you just said, and thank you for the very valid question. Like I said in my opening statement, you know, it is a great opportunity for this industry. really is an absolutely fantastic opportunity for this industry to do something about its image and to demonstrate that we're actually leaders. And I think we should grab this opportunity. And thank you guys for, Project Zero. Thank you for all of the fantastic projects at FedShip. Thank you for all of the fantastic projects at the other yards. And the opportunity is there. Now, communicate. Let's tell the outside world the good things which we do. Fantastic.
Thank you, gentlemen. If you please could welcome them back to their seats, and then we'll get Pierrick, Patrick, and Nicolas on the stage. Not too bad on timing. Huh? Not too bad on timing. So welcome to our second set of panelists. As mentioned initially, we're here to discuss more on the business side of things, because once you've built a yacht, whether it's zero emission or not, but or low carbon, that yacht has a life. It starts being operated, it is managed, it is insured, it goes chartering, and it is used by owners and their friends. So to discuss I would say the business side aspect, especially when you think of how often these yachts are also sold on the brokerage market afterwards, we have three specialists that who will each give their, I would say, expert opinion, but also discuss with you, if you've got questions for them, how the added value of sustainable yachting can change actually the future face of business. So thank you for the three of you to be here. I would like to start with Nicolas as a question, because we were talking about construction, and once the yacht is built, obviously, and even during construction, it needs to be insured. So we talked about alternative fuels and the use of new technologies, proof of concept, and risk assessment. And I think it is important to have a view from the insurer's perspective, whether there are any constraints, what are the difficulties in insuring and operating a yacht that actually could be simply a proof of concept. Nicolas, what's your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Laurent. So in maritime, in order to insure a vessel, here a yacht, there are two main insurance coverage. The first one is liability, in order to protect the owner against, in case of claims, against any third parts, including collision, pollution, etc. So that's the first main coverage. And the second, most popular, is the hull and machinery coverage that protects the owner of the vessel in case of damage to the vessel, its machinery and equipment, nautic toys, tenders and nautic toys. So we have asked leading underwriters of in the insurance market in order to obtain their view on this new generation of sustainable vessel, and they all encourage their members for the P&I or their client for the insurance company to go green and to reduce obviously their emission where possible. As the yacht underwriters, as the yachting sector is part of the marine sector, including shipping, they have already some experience on this kind of vessel. And for the liability side, the leading P&I club of the international group, the well-known Ship Owners Club, say to us that in terms of claim, it will not reduce the cost of their main claim, their main type of incidents, because their main type of incidents relate to crew or bumps and scrapes due to collision. So it's not obvious that low-emission vessel will change this, the result of this incident. They cover also the wreck removal operations. So in this case, the different source fuels used or batteries will not also reduce the cost of their claim. But that said, they all want to encourage their members, and they are already keen to propose some rewards to their clients in order to their client to have the benefit on competitive rate and reduction for some service or from some selected professionals. On the second side, for the underwriters, they are also very interested by this new generation of vessel, and they indicate to us that a vessel with less noise, less pollution, less vibration, fewer moving parts inside the engine room will potentially give less maintenance operation and potentially also less risk for them. So they did not say that they are not, they say that they are not able now to propose reduction rate for this type of vessel because they will need a background and some historic on this type of propulsion, but they are already ready to propose ecological bonus or some other incentives. And without naming some insurance company, we have been informed that they want this kind of clients because it seems that owners of this type of vessel are conscientious and will maintain well their yacht. So they are already keen to propose some incentives. So yes, it's a good evolution for them.
Thank you, Nicolas. So basically, we've got the green light from the risk assessment side and classification societies, and we've got the green light from the insurance side, right? About shifting to green yachts, low carbon yachts. What's the perception or what's the situation on the business side of things? And I would like to start with Pierrick about the charter market, so that he can give us a bit of a feedback from his existing experience and his projections into the future.
Thank you for your question. First, I would like to start with some numbers. There are slightly more than 1,800 yachts available for charter on the market. Among them, there are slightly less than 200 that are less than 3 years old, meaning that the construction and the engineering started 6 years ago. It means that the fleet is quite old, and it's very difficult to offer green solutions on this type of yachts. That's why clients are not requesting, or it's not one of their main criteria for green yachts, such as said, but it's more on the luxury experience and less on the green side for the time being, but I hope for a change in the future, and I seriously hope that the yachts that are under construction now will be on the charter market in the next 3-4 years with more greener solutions.
So you say that one of the issues is not, it has to do with the lack of product, the lack of offer.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is nothing for the moment, really, apart some yachts with few solar panels, but no real solutions where we can promote.
Okay, so there's no product, but then on the other side, from the retail side, was the wishes or desires or expression of interest into greener solution from clients, or is it about going to protected areas in terms of, or is it still always in the end the same circuit? What's your?
No, of course. I mean, at Fraser, we initiated 2 years ago a green guide to the attention of the owners and captains, just to organize something, because we still consider that there's something to be done. In many aspects, like reducing the speed, as we mentioned before, or we can also organize with kids during a charter beach cleaning with the crew. That is very popular, and most of the time the parents are joining the group, also to drop the anchor in a sandy area, or yeah, there's all alternative solutions that we can provide during the charter, but not coming from the yacht itself.
Yeah, so from a chicken and egg situation, it's a combination of lack of product but also lack of request.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad that a client is not requesting me, because I wouldn't know what to answer him.
Okay. Patrick, your reaction to that and your position on the current market situation?
Well, in a day that's been full of visionary people, thought leaders, and people at the cutting edge of the industry, I think it's good to end with a healthy dose of reality at the end of the day. At Northrop & Johnson, we represent about 10% of the market globally for sales and charter. So I think we have a fairly good representative sample of client views. Is there a wave of interest in chartering sustainable yachts? No. Is there a wave of interest in owning charter yachts that have green solutions and have sustainable technology on board? No. Is there a wave of clients looking to buy yachts with sustainable solutions? No. So whilst I'm not at all disheartened, because I see the scale of the opportunity ahead, we are at the very start of this. And I'm not disheartened at all, because whilst I don't see demand strongly, and of course I'm not tarring everyone with the same brush. In fact, I'm not berating anybody. Whilst I don't see strong demand right now, I see a strong demand in the next generation. When you speak to the children of our clients, they have a completely different view on things. And I don't think there's a resistance to change because people are against green solutions or sustainable solutions or alternative fuels. There is a resistance to change because humans are resistant to change, full stop. I pulled up this chart here, which was looking at the introduction of solar panel technology globally. And you can see this chart on the bottom right. The development of solar technology in the 70s resulted in the first solar panels with a per watt price of $100. Zero take-up in the first, 25 years? Or negligible take-up. So the price comes down and down and down. The benefits are all there. It's green, it's clean, it's good, it works, it's fine. But interest, take-up, adoption, zero. Why? Because people don't want to change. The price comes right down. The price is acceptable. Adoption rate, zero. Negligible. Because people don't want to change. And finally, we start seeing people thinking that, okay, it's proven, it's reliable, it's acceptable, I can move forward and start installing it. But for me, in terms of, and I speak very generally, sustainable solutions, the yachting community is at the very, very left-hand edge of that top chart. We're still working, the 35 yacht owners who are building those alternative fuel yachts. They are the pure visionaries and innovators at the very, very leading edge of a change. And we still have a long way to go. If you think of all we haven't even got to the early adopters, never mind the late majority or the laggards. So I think the size of the task is still very big ahead of us, but I'm still extremely optimistic about the future.
So you're optimistic about the next generation more than the current one. That's a question to everyone. So how do you think we can avoid waiting 50 years for these changes and this shift to happen? What's missing? As I said earlier, the green light is there for all aspects. The innovations, the technology, the fuels, the regulations, okay, they may be behind track, but they're moving forward. So what, in your opinion, all of you, is going to help make things shift faster for adoption of these solutions so that we don't have, like the solar panels, to wait for 50 years for the next time?
Personally, I think change is coming, and change is coming fast with the next generation. again, I'm not berating anybody in the current, in my generation. We're so deep-rooted in our own experiences and the way things have been that we resist change. But right now, and I might say thankfully, it's socially acceptable amongst the yachting community to jump on a jet, go transatlantic, get in a helicopter, go on board a yacht, and then spend tens of thousands of litres of fossil fuel to have a family holiday. I don't think the next generation is going to perceive that that is socially acceptable. And once that societal change comes about, we'll see change very fast.
Thank you. From a... Yes, Espen.
Good evening, Espen Ono speaking. I very much agree with what Patrick just said. But coming back also to the previous panelists' discussion, and the question was being asked, why aren't more people just embracing this immediately, that it's so easy and everything is available? And I would argue that it's not. We haven't discussed at all, there is a political dimension to this. If you want to go out today and fuel hydrogen, there are not many places you can do that. Reality is, there has to be an infrastructure that has to be put in place. That's very much a political dimension. Any alternative fuel, the jury is still out. If you look at the commercial, the maritime industry, the ships, the commercial ships, the jury is still out on what is going to be the alternative fuel. Is it going to be hydrogen? Is it going to be methanol? Is it going to be LNG? Is it going to be something else? A lot of that will be determined by to what extent the politicians are supporting one direction or the other, because they will all, at least some of them, require major investments in infrastructure and distribution of these fuels. I think that's an important aspect of it that perhaps hasn't been discussed, and which may be partially the answer to why everyone isn't just embracing it. Some people are still sitting on the fence, waiting to see which direction this is going, to make sure they don't make a bad investment, financially speaking.
But everyone does admit that there is added value in developing these projects and having yachts that will indeed have a lifespan of 20 years being green or being future-ready, as future-proof ready, rather than building another diesel engine yacht.
No, I think the important thing, you can future-proof in many ways. I think the important thing is, first of all, as a designer and naval architect, that you separate the energy production from the propulsion system. So going with electric drive seems to be the answer for that. How you produce that energy, if you arrange the vessel and the design of the vessel in such a way that you can easily change. Today, typically, you would have diesel generators coupled with batteries for zero emission for shorter periods of times, whether at stationary or at lower speed. You can couple it with fuel cells and production of electricity through fuel cells, either through methanol and reformers producing hydrogen, or hydrogen if you can get hold of it. And if you arrange the design of the vessel in such a way that the engine room has enough space and is easily accessible without ripping the whole boat apart, then you would have thought that perhaps you could follow up and improve on and adopt the future technologies as they become available. One aspect is, of course, how do you store the energy? We saw a very, very interesting slide here from FedShip that actually shows some of the particular requirements for storage of the different types of fuel. And that is something, a very important aspect of it as well, in addition to where you actually put the plant inside the engine room. But it's not as easy as it may have been portrayed as being, I would say. We all would love to do it, but there are many answers. There are many questions that today remain unanswered, which will depend on political will.
Thank you. There was a question at the back. And then I have a few more for you guys on the panel.
Just coming back to a couple of points in terms of not being solutions available today. One of the easiest solutions that we have, which is available, which can be used on legacy vessels, is to use the second generation of biofuels, the drop-in fuels. So you now have hydro-treated vegetable oils, which can reduce, providing the feedstock and and the process is of the right order, you can reduce the carbon emissions by 90%. And they're essentially drop-in diesels that can be used in many existing diesel engines today. So there is a solution for those charter guests who want to have very much reduced carbon emissions. The downside to it is that it's 2 to 3 times more expensive than diesel fuel. So that's the green premium that people have to be willing to pay to reduce their emissions.
Well, which is in fact the question I wanted to ask the panel is about the extra cost, the added value, and basically the possibility when you put, whether it's a yacht for sale or charter, the difference in price. I mean, what's the reception or the perception from the market about today's situation, but also in the future? I mean, do you see that evolving or being accepted, that the fact that when you have two similar products and one is greener but more expensive, that will actually go, or it doesn't make a difference today? Patrick?
I think it's a simple cost-benefit analysis on the whole. You know, Malcolm's offered a solution there, which is great, but as he himself would say, but is it readily available in every refueling stop globally? No.
They're setting up the infrastructure now, Patrick. So there's a company called Good Fuels who are going to be providing it in the Mediterranean and in the Caribbean. So they're developing that infrastructure. And to Espen's point about the importance of infrastructure, for example, we now have about 120 ports around the world where you can bunker methanol. So there is already an alternative fuel that's available easily, that can be easily road transported, that is easily available in ports around the world. So, you know, there are solutions. It's just the willingness to adopt them.
This is why I think, to end on a positive note from myself, we're on the cusp of something really exciting, because now we're on the cusp of having viable solutions, tested solutions, affordable solutions. So when people start looking at the cost versus the benefit, it actually, okay, maybe it is 10 to 20% more or whatever, and I'm talking very generally. But let's remember, we are talking about people that can make a call on that. They have the means to be able to show leadership. Sebastian earlier was talking about us in the yachting community being almost like the Formula One. You know, we've got the money to make these solutions and to move forwards, and then show perhaps the commercial world or the wider maritime world how things could be. So I'm very, very hopeful.
Just a point on that, Patrick, it's actually the commercial world that's leading at the moment. We have companies like Maersk who've invested in methanol container ships. We already have hydrogen fuel cell powered ferry boats. We have battery ferry boats. So in actual fact, I would say that we need to take a leaf out of the commercial shipping world and adapt the technologies that they're already using and bring them on board into the superyacht industry, as we've done with many technologies, such as hybrid, such as dynamic positioning, such as waste heat recovery. All of these technologies and systems have been around in the shipping industry for many, many years.
Thank you. Thank you to all. Unfortunately, we can't carry on the conversation too long. We started late, but we have to backtrack on the time. We'll probably continue in July during the Energy Boat Challenge. I would just like to have a concluding remark from our three panelists, very briefly, very quickly, about, I mean, we talked about added value, but we also realized that there's a big gap between the reality of what we can put forward and the perception by the market, whether it's charter or even many yacht owners. What would be your opinion, view, or suggestion into closing that gap between the reality of what's available and the reality of what's on the marketplace? It's a tricky question.
Well, from a charter point of view, the solution needs to come from the owner and from the shipyard. Because if we don't have the product to offer, then the charter can choose between two products. Simple as that from my point of view.
as Malcolm say, I think that for the insurance point of view or the finance point of view, they have already some group and some association like Poseidon Principles in shipping that with some leading insurance company that participate and push this new tendency. So normally when you see this new tendency in the shipping, some months or some years after, we will see this in the yachting. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Patrick, last words?
I wish I had a magic wand to close that gap. I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I agree with you that we see an environmental decline that's quite rapid, and we see a take-up of sustainable solutions that's relatively slow. And that's a worrying gap. I don't think there's any magic formula to suddenly close it very quickly, but I think it'll be multifaceted. It'll be a combination of reduction in costs, it'll be legislation, it'll be a whole series of things, but I'm afraid I don't have that magic answer.
And initiatives like the Energy Boat Challenge to actually work on innovation and demonstrate the feasibility. Yes, Espen? Well, then you'll have the last word, because otherwise Bernard is not going to be happy that we're not concluding the session.
No, just very, very quickly. In the midst of all this crisis we're going through right now politically in Eastern Europe, there's one effect of that which may actually cause this delta between the costs of traditional fuels and the new technologies to be reduced dramatically, because the cost of diesel and fuel today, they're predicting a scarcity of diesel over the next few weeks and months, which will drive the cost even higher. And if this continues for the foreseeable future, the delta between the new technologies and the traditional technologies will be reduced dramatically, and that might actually be probably the only one positive thing of what's happening over there, but it's perhaps worthwhile mentioning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last question? One last short question, please, and then we're done.
Really short question. I just was curious for the manufacturers in the room, who's doing life cycle assessments now on their boats? Because I think that's an important one. We talk about the operations, but we're not talking about the carbon impact, water impact of the build, but then also the end of life of the boat. So I'm just curious who's doing life cycle assessments at the current time.
Okay, so any shipyard in the room that actually does it can raise their hand. And if not, what we'll do is we'll talk about it in July, because that will be one of the key topics during the conferences of the Energy Boat Challenge. But yes.
Sorry, there is a company that's the Water Revolution Foundation. They have a tool that's doing full, complete life cycle analysis of the production and also the operational aspect. And I believe, obviously, there's a number of shipyards that are involved in that project as well. So it's something that has been taken on board. But the environmental impact of the production is quite small compared to the overall operations over 20, 30, 40, 50 years of operation. It's important, but it's not as much as the operational side.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, the audience, for taking part and being also active in participating and asking questions. We will continue in July. I hope you've appreciated this session, even if it was the last one of the day. And, well, not exactly the last one, but the rest is more fun. We certainly hope to see you in July from the 4th to the 9th, whether as participants to the race, or as speakers, if you're interested in taking part, but definitely in Monaco for the Energy Boat Challenge. Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen.
So we'll continue. We have now, you see the wing that you have behind you. Voyez